So Oliver happens to be our next speaker. So Oliver comes from Square. We met a few years back as he was studying at Square. We were work neighbors. I was at Twitter and he was across the street literally. And we just found out that we're now actual neighbors on San Francisco Peninsula, work from home neighbors, I guess. So that's cool. So Oliver's been at Square for a while. And so recently his team has looked into post-COVID-19 world and the work from home specifically, and sort of what the implications of that are to learning and development. So that's going to be the topic. So with that, I'll pass the screen share back to Oliver.
Thank you, Marco. Let me get this going. Everyone seeing that? The hello? Okay, I see the thumbs up. Great. All right. Good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are. Before I begin, I wanted to give huge thank yous to Plus for the opportunity to speak today, my team for all their support, and the communications and legal partners at Square for supporting me in producing this. A little bit about myself. Marco already explained. I'm Oliver Liao. I'm a learning and development lead at Square. I've been with the organization in 4 years. And one fun fact is I haven't worn a collared shirt since I started working from home. So this is for everyone here today, this is for you. 2020, what a year, right? And the second half, it's still loading. My intent today is to share with each of you Square's learning and development narrative of how we found our focus areas for the remainder of the year. I touch upon how we are all in this together. What we are in together should be of no surprise to everyone here today. By that, I mean, I know each and every one of us are experiencing organizational challenges, from COVID-19 to the protests happening around the country following the events of systemic racism and police brutality. This has challenged every organization to think differently. COVID-19 particularly challenged us to work in a remote workforce office economy, or did it? And I say that because this takes me to my next point. We now live between two boundaries of the workforce, where we were and where we're heading. Yet we're all stuck right there in the middle right now. It's all of our common grounds. What's great, however, about being in the middle is that we know these two truths. One, some organizations will go back, business as usual, pre-COVID-19, back in the offices. Two, some won't. Instead, they will find a new normal, such as teams being fully distributed, partly distributed, etc. Now I invite you to join me as I walk you through our lens at Square of what we've done with as a learning and development team within the people team. Before I set the stage for what you see here, prior to COVID-19, Square wanted to evolve towards a distributed workforce with some building blocks in place. Roughly 60% of our employees were in San Francisco, and 90% was in the United States. COVID-19 was a mechanism for us to act faster. What was critical for our team to find our focus areas was to learn and hear from these four groups. Group one, the org leaders. They set the vision. We have a team within parts of our business diving deep into current events and always assessing what are the best systemic decisions for employees and the business. At this level, it's not just one person's opinion that matters. We hear everyone out to find the best solutions. The second group here are our HR business partners. They hear all the pain points of each business unit and help highlight what is or what's not working. Third group, people analytics. We have a survey culture at Square. We love data, just like many companies these days. And we like to stay in touch with our employee base. People Analytics hosts an engagement survey 2 times a year. With the current events going on, we thought this was an important time for another survey to check in with employees, see how they're doing, understand what's working and what's not. The fourth group here is industry news, such as Burson, Deloitte, Korn Ferry, etc. And we are also monitoring government orders where our companies operate, guidance from health authorities, and the development of widely available testing. Based on these four groups, here are our focus areas. Voila, here they are. I promise you this is the densest slide I have in this presentation. Now, before I jump into each and every one of these, I want to stress again to an earlier point, we're all in the middle, right? No one knows how it'll shake out. We're working the best we can to ensure what we are doing is best for our employees. There's still so much to explore. Inventing and learning, if you will, no pun intended for a learning and development audience. Okay, let's get into it. So the first bucket, distributed workforce, 100% virtual onboarding. Our day one onboarding, we call it Square One. We like our puns here at Square, is now 100% virtual, and we intend to keep it that way. Team effectiveness. By the end of this quarter, we are adding roughly 10 self-guided team effectiveness exercises available for anyone within the organization, focused on remote teams, for managers to also use and leverage to have these activities with them. These guys are inspired by the Tuckman stages of team development. Third, navigating career development. We're exploring methodologies, focusing on finding personal values first, considering how values of individuals may have shifted since transitioning into a remote workforce and also all the current. The next bucket here is talent management. This focus area is massive. Like for anyone who's worked in like organizational development, like it is really big. So at the highest level to these three bullet points that you see, we are reassessing how to approach, document, and assess performance conversations, particularly right now to the current events, by providing guidance around navigating difficult conversations and setting a cadence for accountability. The third bucket, leadership, coaching. We recently launched a coaching offering for our managers focusing on the 3 levels of listening, powerful questioning, and accountability. And we continue to leverage an external vendor, our partner, BetterUp, for one-on-one coaching for our managers. Second, leading distributed teams. We launched an offering focusing on embracing the 5 levels of distributed teams. If some of you read this on Medium, Matt Mullenweg is the author and the brainchild behind this. We were inspired by this. How to set that right environment and what makes distributed teams effective. Third, diversity and inclusion partnership. We have and will continue to partner with our diversity and inclusion team in communicating within our internal channels. Following the events of systemic racism and police brutality, we assessed and realized there is value in communicating events together, such as, hey, here's a fireside chat with our head of diversity and inclusion. And while you're at it, have you considered a coaching class to foster open discussions with your teams around current events? And the last bucket I have here is learning experiences, 100% virtual. Similar to an earlier point for onboarding, we made all our teams' offerings virtual. Our current goal this quarter is converting a 2-day in-person leadership program for managers. We call it Integral Lead into 2 virtual half days. Assessing workshop length, we're constantly looking again at how we can make all existing and also future offerings shorter. Third and final, communal peer learning. In the spirit of experimenting and learning, last week, we launched our first learning and development speaker series, focusing on leadership called Lessons from Leads. Everyone's invited, it's virtual, and it's an unscripted dialogue with a high-profile leader within our organization. In addition, we have launched a train-to-trainer program, which will act as a foundational structure to peer-to-peer learning at a later time. Now that you know what the L&D team at Square is up to, with that, I want to close with, we'll get through this together. We're in this together. And I'd love to hear your journey, your stories, and continue this dialogue that I'm having in the TechKnowCon Slack channel. Thank you for your time, everyone. Okay, Marco, should I stop sharing? Okay.
It's fine. You can keep sharing if you want, or either way, it's really Q&A question. Thank you, Oliver. Thanks for sharing the initiatives and sort of seeing this. I love how you shared a plan, but I also love how you came up with this plan. And I sort of what I wrote down is, you know, your leadership is assessing the world, your HR BPs are assessing the people, and then your people analytics are assessing the data. And so it's kind of interesting how you have this like sort of 360 view of what's going on internally, externally, and kind of having that inform then the 4 buckets that you're going to invest in. So that was pretty cool. There are a couple of questions that I picked up on the chat. Lisa was asking, are we going to even go back into the organizational structure as usual once things return to normal? Does that even make sense? Any thoughts on that? Like, do you think the world has changed forever? Or are we going to go back to status quo or square one, or is it going to be somewhere in between? Huh? That was good. Huh?
Yeah, that was really smooth, Marco. I think Lisa, you asked that question. It's a very interesting one. I don't have the answer to that. However, if I were to speak for Square as an organization, I believe it's public knowledge that we have decided to go on a remote workforce. And you could read an article around that speaking specifically about that. Regarding like the future of all organizations, my thoughts, just being in the L&D space, I think it really depends on the goals of the business and how that business operates, right? Sure, it would be great if all companies are able to go remote if it works for them. If it doesn't, then, you know, I'd recommend them to make the best decision. Similar to what we're doing at Square, I imagine there are many organizational leaders that are looking at all these small little elements and making sure that they're making the best decision for the employees and for the business.
I think Lisa was also asking, you referred to the 5 levels of distributed teams. Was that based on the Sam Harris interview with the founder of Automatic?
Yes, Matt Mullenweg, that's him, yeah. So 5 is Nirvana, which I think he put in for fun. I recommend everyone to poke at that article and just get an idea of like, where do you think your organization is at? And as L&D leaders, look into like, where do you want to be at, right? And who are your stakeholders? Who are your partners that you could begin influencing these 5 principles for them to understand so that you could work together for, again, what's best for your business and your organization.
Yeah, and I believe I shared that article a couple of months ago on the TechKnowCon Slack channel. We can find it or reshare it. But yeah, I love the idea of remote is not black or white. It's not binary, but there are levels of remote effectiveness essentially. So thinking through that was pretty cool. Jasmine is asking, so how are you thinking about your 100% online or virtual onboarding and training? You had those 2 things in those 2 opposing squares. So what does that mean, 100% onboarding?
Yeah, so when I say 100%, I think I may not be the best person to answer that because I don't represent the program manager that's creating these. What I can say is that 100%, we are trying our very best because one of our focus areas is to provide extra love outside of San Francisco to our employees, right? And as we grow more and more distributed, how are we able to service them in the best possible way? And with that being said, onboarding, to my point earlier, is 100% virtual. Our offerings are 100% virtual. We're in the process of converting a 2-day workshop to 100% virtual. And our goal is to technically be, 100% virtual for many of our offerings. And if things change, uncertainty, right? We may pivot. However, right now, I can't give a right answer of what that pivot will be.
Got it, thank you. And then Asta was asking a question about any feedback on that experience, right? So as you roll out, do you have any feedback loop from how well is the remote coaching or remote learning working? Yeah.
I could speak for an insight I have from our program manager for our onboarding. What I know there is from the results that we received regarding like whether they onboarded post-COVID and pre-COVID, the sentiment, to be honest, was better for a remote experience. We got some qualitative feedback regarding that. It feels a little bit more personal because everyone's at home and being able to take breaks and all that, they can do it whenever they need to. And from an operational perspective too, it's smoother and easier for us. We don't have to, remember in my pod earlier, think about all the logistics, like is the room set up? Do we have enough like swag for these employees, or do we have to get more? It's been easy on both ends.
Got it. And just to kind of brief off of that, and to Melissa's point on the chat about delivering content virtually, how do you think about this onboarding? Is it like here's a top content, or is it also like here's the events, live learning that happens via Zoom or similar? Is there coaching in the mix? Like how blended of that experience is it, or is it just purely content, self-paced driven? Like what's that ratio?
For onboarding, what I could say, it's more of a presentation at this point, if that was what the question was targeting. Yeah.
So presentation as in like you have people presented, or is it like a pre-recorded video?
We have people presenting. We have a live person speaking to a presentation.
Got it. Okay, cool. I'm just reading a question here. How has the decision to have a completely remote workforce impacted others in the group, or maybe specifically? Yeah, that may be more of a question for the Slack channel, because you already shared how it's being impacted you.
Yeah, I could speak broadly about that, just specifically to my team. I can't answer the question and represent the larger organization. Our team has been distributed to begin with, which has been a blessing in disguise before this happened, right? We had people on the East Coast, we had people in Europe, right? So for us, it was normal for us to work in different time zones asynchronously and be able to understand how to like communicate effectively. And what was great about that too is when this all happened, like we had this, muscle memory within us, and we were able to act fast and be able to understand the pain points that people are encountering and provide some resources to support that.
Got it. And so you presented what you're going to do next, sort of as a plan, and that's great. Do you have any metrics linked to that to sort of be able to reflect and say, hey, we achieved what we set to do, or we didn't? Like, what is it you measure? How do you measure success, I guess?
Yeah. Our current measures of success for the virtual, right? I could speak for that just within the people L&D team is we're looking primarily at Kirkpatrick level 1 responses of just that experience, right? Are they having a good time or are they not? What we intend to do in the future, and it's still not defined, so I can't speak concretely about that, is to partner with our people analytics and think a little bit more of how the level 2 and the iceberg of level 3 can be like.
Got it. So you're talking about the sentiment. So you're measuring the sentiment. Are they happy from the class? And now you also want to know, did they learn? So that would be the level 2, right? And possibly did they apply it to their job? And that would be level 3, right?
Yeah, and 3 and 4, as we all know, is difficult.
Yeah. We skipped level 2 altogether because we were doing micro learning when I was at Twitter. But 3 and 4 were very interesting. Like, are you using what you learned in your job, and what's the impact of you using what you learned in your job? So that was, and we did that via surveys 30, 60, 90 days out. So that was kind of like how we dealt with. Yeah, I know this is a common conversation in these circles. How do we measure the effectiveness of training? I'm looking at Rajan right now. I know it's one of his favorite topics to ask questions about. So I'll leave it at that.
Right, I don't disagree.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you, Oliver. Thank you so much. We'll also, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to ask in chat. Oliver is also on Slack, so you can we can continue there. So thank you.
All right, you're welcome.